Biased judge sends Innocente into prison, then one phone call changes everything. Samuel Thomas was framed for a crime he didn't commit. He stood before Judge Kavanaugh, a man who showed no mercy to black teens. The courtroom was silent, his lawyer powerless, and the evidence paper thin. The judge was ready to erase his future. Then, a phone rang. One call. Everything changed. Samuel Thomas was a young man with big dreams. He was 19 years old and wanted to be a lawyer one day. He worked very hard and stayed out of trouble. He had a job at a grocery store and saved his money. He knew life was not easy, but he believed that if he worked hard and did the right thing, he would have a good future. That evening, Samuel was running an errand for his mother. She asked him to buy a few things from the store before coming home. He didn't mind helping her. He bought the items and put the receipt in the bag. As he walked home, holding the bag in one hand and his phone in the other, he heard loud sirens. The flashing red and blue lights of police cars filled the street ahead. A small store had broken glass on the ground, and the door was wide open. People stood around, talking in low voices. Something bad had happened. Samuel slowed down, looking toward the store. Hey! You! Stop right there! A loud voice made Samuel freeze. He turned and saw two police officers coming toward him. His heart started beating faster. Me? He asked. Yes, you. Hands up where we can see them, one officer said. Samuel felt confused but did what they asked. He raised his hands a little. What's wrong? He asked. There was a robbery, the officer said. You look like the guy we're looking for. Samuel frowned. What? No, he was just. Where were you 10 minutes ago? The second officer asked. He was at the grocery store down the street, Samuel said quickly. He was buying things for my mom. Do you have proof? Samuel nodded and reached for his bag. The receipt is in here. Before he could take it out, the officer grabbed his arm roughly. Hey! Samuel shouted. We have a witness, the officer said. He saw a young black man running from the store after the robbery. That sound like you? Samuel's stomach felt tight. No. He didn't do anything. The officers didn't listen. One of them grabbed his other arm and pulled his hands behind his back. Cold metal cuffs snapped around his wrists. Panic filled Samuel's chest. Wait. Please. Check the cameras. Ask the people at the store. You can explain at the station, the officer said. People in the crowd whispered. Some shook their heads, but no one spoke up. No one helped. The officers pulled Samuel toward the police car, his heart pounded in his chest. This had to be a mistake. He had done nothing wrong. The ride to the police station felt like a nightmare. The handcuffs hurt his wrists, and fear made it hard to breathe. He thought about his mother. He thought about his older brother, Marcus. What would they do when they found out? At the station, the officers put him in a small room. The walls were grey, and the air smelled like sweat and old coffee. They asked him the same questions again and again. They didn't care about his answers. Then, the witness came in. Samuel knew him. The man's name was Mr. Jennings. He owned a pawn shop near the store. Samuel had seen him a few times but had never talked to him. Jennings looked at Samuel, then turned to the officers. Yeah, that's him, he said. Samuel's body went cold. What? No. You didn't do anything because you didn't do anything. Jennings shrugged. He saw him near the store right after it happened. He looked like he was thinking about running. That's not true. Samuel S. was shaking. He was just walking home. He didn't even go near the store. The officers didn't listen. One of them wrote something down. The other nodded. All right, one officer said. Book him. The words felt like a punch to the stomach. The officers grabbed Samuel and took him down the hall. They took his fingerprints and a photo of his face. They put him in a cold, grey cell. The metal bars closed in front of him with a loud clang. Samuel gripped the bars tightly. His chest rose and fell fast. This wasn't right. This wasn't fair. Time passed slowly. The room was too quiet. Then, suddenly, a loud voice filled the air. Where is he? Where is my brother? Samuel's eyes widened. Marcus. Footsteps echoed through the hall. Samuel rushed to the bars just as his brother appeared. Marcus Thomas was 26 years old. He was strong, both in body and in spirit. He had worked hard all his life and had always looked out for Samuel. Their father had left when they were young, so Marcus had stepped up. He had promised to protect his little brother. Now, he stood outside the cell, his face full of anger. This is a mistake. Marcus shouted at an officer. Let him go. He didn't do anything. The officer sighed. Take it up with the judge. Marcus slammed his hand on the counter. You arrested him with no proof. A man said he looked suspicious, and that was a no. Did you check the store cameras? The officer rubbed his forehead. He don't make the rules. Marcus turned to Samuel. His jaw was tight, and his eyes burned with anger and something else, pain. I'm getting you out, Marcus said. His voice was steady, full of promise. Samuel swallowed hard and held onto the bars. Marcus, no, Marcus said. And he won't stop until uno prove it. As Marcus walked away, Samuel felt a small bit of hope in his chest. His brother would fight for him. He just had to hold. Honorable Samuel held the cold metal bars, watching his brother walk away. His heart felt heavy. Marcus had promised to help him, but Samuel was still scared. He had never been in trouble before. He always believed the truth would win. Now, he wasn't sure. The next morning, a loud noise made him jump. A police officer hit the bars with a baton. Thomas. Time to go. Samuel's hands felt cold and sweaty. He was led down a long, grey hallway. The air smelled like old paper and cleaning supplies. His stomach hurt, but he kept walking. A guard took him to a small room. A man in a messy suit sat at a table. He didn't even look up. I'm your lawyer, the man said, flipping through some papers. Gerald Parks. His voice was flat, like he didn't care. Samuel sat down. He didn't do anything, he said. He was just walking home. Parks sighed and shook his head. The witness saw you. That's enough for the police. Samuel leaned forward. But he have proof. My grocery store receipt. Parks waved his hand. We'll mention it, sure. But juries don't always care about little details. You should take a deal. Samuel frowned. A deal? You want me to say you did it? Parks shrugged. It might be better than going in front of Judge Kavanaugh. Samuel's chest tightened. He knew that name. Judge William Kavanaugh was famous for giving black men the worst punishments. People said he didn't listen. He didn't care. Samuel shook his head. He won't lie. He didn't do it. Parks sighed again and finally looked at him. Then you need to be ready. This won't be easy. The courtroom was big and quiet. The wooden doors shut behind Samuel as officers led him to his seat. He could feel people watching him. He looked around and saw Marcus sitting in the front row. His hands were clenched into fists. Judge Kavanaugh sat high above everyone. His face was stiff. His white hair was neatly combed. His black robe had no wrinkles. He didn't look at Samuel. He picked up some papers and started reading. A tall man in a dark suit stood up. He was the prosecutor. His eyes were cold. He looked at Samuel like he was already guilty. Your Honor, the man said. The state will prove that Samuel Thomas is dangerous and should be in prison. Samuel's heart pounded. He wasn't dangerous. He wasn't a criminal. The prosecutor walked slowly across the room. His voice was loud and strong. The defendant was near the crime scene. A witness saw him. And let's be honest, young men like him don't just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Samuel's chest tightened. This wasn't about facts. It was about what he looked like. The prosecutor turned toward the jury. Look at him, he said. Young. Strong. The kind of man who knows how to take what he wants. Samuel gripped the table. His body felt hot with anger. This wasn't fair. His lawyer, Parks, stood up and straightened his tie. Your Honor, he said, there is no proof that my client did anything. No fingerprints. No security footage. Only a witness who saw someone who looked like him. Judge Kavanaugh looked bored. He leaned on one hand like he had already made his decision. The prosecutor smirked. Circumstantial evidence is still evidence. He turned back to the jury. Would you feel safe if a man like him was walking toward you at night? Samuel's hands curled into fists under the table. He had never hurt anyone. He had never stolen anything. But they were making him sound like a criminal. Marcus sat on the bench, his jaw tight. He had seen unfair trials before, but watching it happen to Samuel made his blood boil. The judge barely listened. The lawyer didn't fight hard enough. That night, Marcus stayed up late. He opened his laptop and started searching. He looked at every case Judge Kavanaugh had ruled Onorevole the more he read, the angrier he got. It was clear if you were black and stood in front of Judge Kavanaugh, you didn't stand a chance. His heart was beating fast. His hands felt tight as he clicked through case after case. The more he read, the more upset he became. The truth was clear, Judge Kavanaugh was not fair. Black men like Samuel got long, harsh sentences, even when the evidence was weak. But when white men stood in front of the same judge, things were different. Many of them walked free, even when they had done something wrong. Some got very short jail time, while others only had to do community service. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. Marcus leaned back in his chair. His head was spinning. Samuel's future was in the hands of a man who didn't care about justice. He needed help. He needed someone who knew how to fight back. He grabbed his phone and scrolled through his contacts. His eyes stopped on one name, Lisa Jennings. She was a lawyer who fought against unfair trials. She had helped people win cases when the system tried to crush them. Marcus took a deep breath and cold air. The phone rang twice before Lisa answered. Marcus? What is going on? Marcus' voice was firm. It's Samuel. They're trying to send him to prison for something he didn't do. Lisa's tone grew serious. Tell me everything. Marcus explained everything, the false witness, the weak evidence, and how Judge Kavanaugh had already made up his mind. Then he told her about the cases he had found. The unfair rulings. The pattern of injustice. Lisa was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Meet me tomorrow. Bring all your research." The next day, Marcus walked into Lisa's office. Papers and law books covered her desk. She was sitting behind it, her eyes sharp and serious. "Show me," she said. Marcus opened his laptop and pointed at the screen. He showed her case after case. "Look at this," he said, scrolling down. A black man stole food because he was hungry. 5 years in prison. But this guy, Marcus pointed to another case. A white man robbed a store with a gun. Only 6 months in jail. Lisa leaned in. Her eyes narrowed as she read. "This is bad," she murmured. "Really bad." Marcus's hands curled into fists. "We have to do something." Lisa nodded. "We will. But we need more proof. If we can show the judge yes anything just unfair but also corrupt, we can take him down." Marcus frowned. "How do we prove that?" Lisa tapped her fingers on the desk. "Innocente who used to work in his courtroom. If anything shady was happening, they might know." Marcus's heart pounded. "Can you get them to talk?" Lisa's lips curved into a small smile. "Leave that to me." 2 days later, Marcus and Lisa met a man in a quiet coffee shop. He wore a plain shirt and jeans. His hair was slightly messy, and he looked nervous. His name was David Wells. He had worked for Judge Kavanaugh for 10 years. "He shouldn't be talking about this," David said, looking around as if someone might be listening. But he seemed too much to stay quiet. Lisa leaned forward. "We just want the truth." David took a deep breath. His voice was low. "Judge Kavanaugh isn't just racist. He makes money off his rulings." Marcus's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" David sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Private prisons," he said. "They get paid for each inmate they hold. The longer the sentence, the more money they make. And guess what? Kavanaugh has connections with them. He sends people to prison, and those prisons send money back to him." Marcus felt sick. "So is ruining lives for money?" David nodded. "That's exactly what is doing." Lisa pulled out a notebook. "Do you have proof?" David reached into his bag and pulled out a folder. "He kept records," he said. He knew it was wrong, but he was afraid to speak up. "Now, he can't keep quiet." Lisa opened the folder and flipped through the pages. There were financial documents, emails, and case files. It was all there, proof that Judge Kavanaugh was working with private prisons. Marcus clenched his fists. "This is it, this is how we stop him." Lisa looked up, her face serious. "We have to move fast. If we don't, Samuel won't stand a chance." That night, Marcus and Lisa worked late. They gathered more evidence. They printed records, talked to families, and wrote down everything they had learned. By the time the sun started rising, they were ready. The next morning, Marcus and Lisa walked into the courthouse. Marcus felt his heart beating in his chest. The big doors, the long hallways, the heavy silence, it all felt wrong. He knew so many innocent people had walked through these doors, hoping for justice but getting none. Inside the courtroom, Samuel sat in his chair, wearing the same grey prison uniform. He looked tired, but when he saw Marcus, he gave a small nod. Marcus promised himself he would not let his brother down. The trial began. Lisa stood up, holding a folder full of papers. Your Honor, we have important evidence, she said. This shows that Judge Kavanaugh has been unfair in his past rulings. Judge Kavanaugh's face did not change, but his eyes narrowed. He looked at Elisa, then at Marcus. He knew. He knew what they had found. This has nothing to do with the case, the judge said. His voice was hard. Sit down, Ms. Jennings. Lisa stayed where she was. Your Honor, my client has the right to a fair trial. Judge Kavanaugh's finger tapped on the desk. He said this is not important, he said. The jury will ignore it. Marcus's hands curled into fists. The judge was not even pretending to be fair. He was stopping them from speaking the truth. Lisa took a deep breath. Your Honor, we ask that this evidence be added to the case. The judge's hand slammed down on his desk. Denied. Marcus felt anger rise inside him. They had proof, and it still did not matter. How could this be happening? But outside the courtroom, things were changing. News about the case spread fast. People started talking. The city had seen unfair trials before, but this time, there was real evidence. People were angry. The next morning, the courthouse was crowded. Protesters stood outside, holding signs and shouting. Justice for Samuel. Fair trials for all. Their voices filled the air. Marcus stood on the courthouse steps, looking at the crowd. People from all over the city had come. Some were young, some were old, but they all wanted the same thing, justice. News reporters filmed everything. This was not just about Samuel anymore. This was about every person Judge Kavanaugh had hurt. Inside the courthouse, Lisa was ready for the next step. She filed a request for a new judge. Your Honor, she said, we believe Judge Kavanaugh cannot be fair in this case. We ask that he step down. The courtroom was silent. Marcus held his breath, waiting for an answer. Judge Kavanaugh's face was dark with anger. He looked at Elisa, then at Marcus, then at the people in the courtroom. His fingers tightened around his gavel. Denied, he said. His voice was sharp. A wave of whispers filled the room. People shook their heads. The judge was not even trying to hide the truth anymore. He wanted to stay on this case because he was afraid. If another judge took over, his secrets would come out. Marcus felt his stomach drop. They had done everything right, but the system was still against them. He looked at Lisa, searching for an answer. Lisa took a deep breath and whispered, "We are not finished yet." Lisa and Marcus sat in her office. They were tired but would not give up. Outside, people were still protesting. The news was talking about Samuel's case, but Judge Kavanaugh refused to step down. They needed something big to force a change. Then, something unexpected happened. Lisa got a call from a man named Richard Ball. He used to work in the courthouse. His voice was low, and he sounded nervous. He need to talk, Boyle said. He worked with Judge Kavanaugh. He saw what he did. He sent black men to prison for a long time, even when they did nothing wrong. He changed files and ignored evidence. He did it for money. Lisa and Marcus listened carefully. This was the proof they needed. Lisa wasted no time. She called a news station and set up an interview. That night, Boyle's face was on TV. He told the whole story. He said the judge took bribes and worked with private prisons to keep people locked up. The reaction was huge. People across the country were shocked. The news spread fast. Social media was full of people demanding justice. Many asked why Kavanaugh was still a judge. The next morning, even more people gathered outside the courthouse. Reporters held cameras, waiting for news. Protesters carried signs and chanted. They were not just fighting for Samuel anymore. They wanted all the judges' past cases investigated. Then, a big announcement came. The state legal board would hold a hearing. They would decide if Kavanaugh should stay on Samuel's case or be removed. Lisa and Marcus worked fast. They collected everything, old case files, bank records, and statements from people Kavanaugh had wronged. They were ready to show the truth. The courtroom was full. Journalists and activists filled the seats. The protests outside were loud. Judge Kavanaugh sat in his chair, but he no longer looked powerful. His face was tight, and he did not speak. One by one, the lawyers showed the evidence. Lisa explained how the judge always gave harsh sentences to black men but let white men go free. Marcus showed financial records that proved the judge was taking money from private prisons. Then Boyle spoke. He told the court how the judge had ordered him to change documents and hid the evidence. The room was silent. Then, one of the board members cleared his throat. Judge Kavanaugh is suspended while we investigate further. A wave of whispers moved through the room. Lisa let out a breath of relief. Marcus squeezed his fists. It wasn't over, but they had won this battle. With Kavanaugh gone, a new judge was assigned to Samuel's case. Her name was Judge Martinez. She had a good reputation. People said she was fair and honest. Samuel's case was reviewed again. This time, the truth was clear. The so-called witness had lied. There was no real proof that Samuel was part of the crime. The judge took her time, then spoke the words Samuel had been waiting for. All charges against Samuel Thomas are dropped. For a second, no one moved. Then, Marcus jumped to his feet and clapped his brother on the back. Samuel let out a deep breath. Lisa smiled. People in the courtroom cheered. Outside, the protesters celebrated. Reporters rushed to get interviews. But Samuel wasn't thinking about the cameras. He was thinking about everything he had been through. His life had changed forever. He had felt the fear of losing everything. He had seen how unfair the system could be. He had watched his brother fight for him when no one else would. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. What now, little brother? Samuel looked at him, his eyes full of determination. I'm going to study law, he said. I'll help people like me. Marcus smiled and nodded. Then we'll fight together. As they walked out into the bright sunlight, Samuel knew their fight for justice was just beginning.